Welcome, everyone. My guest today works for one of the largest hotel chains in the world, Hilton. His name is Jason Abdullah, and he is the Senior Digital Marketing Manager for a cluster of Hilton hotels in Orange County. And we're going to get into more of what that means in terms of working with a cluster of hotels. And just to give you a little bit of background on him, he was recognized by Hotel Management Magazine as an emerging leader in the hospitality industry. So this is definitely somebody you're going to want to connect with at some point. He has also previously been with Amazon, Expedia, and Starwood Hotels in sales and marketing positions. So he brings a wealth of knowledge and about 15 years of really insane experience at some really wonderful companies. So thank you so much, Jason, for being here and speaking to me and sharing with my audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is exciting. I love it. Love what you're doing, and I love the podcast, and hopefully there's some value in there. So it's awesome.
Thank you. I know there will be. I know there will be.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to get straight into questions because your background is so impressive to me and what you've been able to accomplish in your career. So can you tell me a little bit about your position right now, some of your main responsibilities that you're doing with Hilton, and specifically a little bit about what it looks like to work for a cluster of hotels? Because that's something that honestly I didn't really understand until we met. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, good question. So cluster, I'll first define that as just a grouping of hotels that Hilton manages here in Southern California. So there's a lot of different hotels all over the world, but I'm specifically responsible for the ones here in Orange County. So my main job is to drive revenue to these hotels using digital marketing. So traditional marketing usually is creating collateral, or it might be doing a radio ad or whatever it might be. My sole job is anything that is digital, that is online, that is focused on getting customers. I'm responsible for understanding those digital technologies and getting people to our hotels using those technologies.
Awesome.
So
that's
typical,
like Facebook, Instagram, like that type of digital marketing, or what else?
Definitely.
What does that entail?
Yeah. So a typical day, on the job would be, thinking about on Google when people search for places to stay or travel. Obviously not during COVID, but sometimes during COVID, people are searching places to stay or places to go. It would be understanding Facebook, doing advertising on Facebook and Instagram, doing advertising on Expedia or like TripAdvisor. If you go to any article and you read about hotels in an article and there's a little, ad or a blurb to book that hotel to that article, that has something to do with it. Really, anywhere you see any place that mentions a hotel, typically I'm involved in that, and my team is involved in really focusing on those types of digital medias, basically.
Wow, that's awesome. What do you think is your biggest driver right now? I think especially, I mean, COVID's a whole other thing, but what is the biggest driver to get bookings in that online space?
Yeah. Really right now it's about safety. It's about cleanliness. People are trying to go see family, but they're trying to be safe about it. So they're really cautious about making sure they stay places where they know there's a cleanliness standard. Obviously, my hotels, have world-class cleanliness standards, partnering with companies like Clorox and things like that. But there's a lot of essential travelers that are going from hospital to hospital, people visiting family. So really it's about just understanding, going on the internet, understanding what people are searching for, looking at the data to see what keywords they're searching for, talking to them when they get to the hotel, asking them questions, looking at the feedback they leave, when they leave, after they leave the hotel, going on Facebook, just seeing which posts they're interacting with and things like that. But for the most part, really, that's what digital marketing is looking at the data, understanding what the market wants, and then kind of adapting to the needs of the market, and then providing that feedback back to the property so they can deliver on what the customers are really looking for.
That's so great. I think digital marketing is so interesting to me because there is such a numbers component to it that I think some people don't really realize when they go into digital marketing. Like they think it's more of, oh, I'm creating posts for Facebook and all of that, but there's so much data that drives all of those decisions. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe I don't know, do people have like a misconception like that?
Yeah.
Am I on the right track? Because that's how
Yeah.
I feel.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's okay. I mean, I try to explain it to, to people sometimes, and it's sort of like flies right over the head because it's a great question. I think that I think I've been very fortunate in that in my career I've done sales analysis and revenue analysis and marketing, traditional marketing, and so those three things combined are perfect for digital marketing because digital marketing is twofold. On the one hand, it's about analyzing data, looking at the numbers, understanding how the algorithms work. On the other hand, you need creative in order to drive a lot of the performance of the data. So you have to understand what people engage with in terms of creative, what content they engage with, what information or copy that resonates with them the most, and then on which channels to feed that content and those images to. So you kind of have to have both sides of it. Thankfully, like nowadays, there's so much technology that allows you to do that pretty easily. So the creation part is less difficult. The execution part is probably the most difficult part. So there's a lot of cloud-based software like Canva that lets you design really amazing stuff in a matter of seconds, and then you put it on, Google or Facebook, and you can launch it to billions of people in a matter of seconds. So it's about understanding those two aspects of it, but it's pretty cool.
So then on your team, and we didn't talk about this before, so I honestly don't know how big your team is, but on your team, do you have people that focus mainly on the analytics and then other people that focus more on the creative, or do you have people that are more of an all-encompassing jack of all trades around marketing?
Yeah. Yes. No, I'm kidding. All of that, because there's Hilton has 6,000 hotels, 6,000 plus hotels all over the world, and you can imagine every single market and every single hotel needs something a bit different. If you're on the East Coast and it's snowing, your advertising and marketing is going to be completely different than if you're in California and it's sunny and people are going to the beach. So to have like a one person do all that would be very difficult. So you need to understand obviously the nuances of that specific market and what those specific hotels need, which is why I'm a cluster in Orange County, because I know the market very well and the hotels might need something different. COVID is a perfect example. There are some states that are wide open, some states are closed. And so if you don't know that and you don't understand what you can and cannot say or what you can and cannot do, it's difficult to market that. So, but at the enterprise level where the brand is, actually the communication is very, very standard across the entire company. It's what our values are, our company, and what we stand for. So, in the corporate team, they're communicating, things that are very common to most markets or most hotels, which is what our brand is. And so you just kind of mirror the two together to really get, at the core of what we do in digital marketing is, what is enterprise, what can they provide us? And then at the property level, what can we do that's a bit different that helps out each individual property?
Awesome. That's so great. Thank you so much for clarifying that and sharing. I think that'll
really
help.
I know. It's
the idea of the cluster is so different to me. But it absolutely makes sense because a company like Hilton, they do have that, national, global, regional marketing that is going to be handled at a much higher level. But do you really need one person doing marketing for one hotel in an area? It totally makes sense to have a team that works with a group of hotels, especially if what they're promoting might look kind of similar. Like you said, all in Orange County, that's going to be very similar versus, I'm in Utah, so I'm part of the snow, the mountain activities and all that. Yeah. That's great.
Right. It's about providing like relevant content to the people who want to hear it. And so, it's not just talking about a beach, it's talking about Laguna Beach or Newport Beach, or you're very specific, right? So you can kind of address some of the things that people really want when they're traveling. And in order to do that, you have to understand the markets really well. So that's what I try my best to do.
Oh, that's great. Okay. That is so helpful. Yeah. I love your job. I love what you're doing. It seems like
me too.
It's so much more diverse than I think when you read your title, right? So senior digital marketing manager, when I hear that, I immediately think, oh, you create graphics for social media or you do Google ads or something like that. But it's so much more than just that. It's really understanding the hotels and where they're at and what's happening and what is going to appeal to to the customer. So that's great. I love that.
Definitely. And we can nerd out on the data all day long if you really want to, but yeah, it's definitely very, very nuanced. And, just an example is like one hotel could have 10 different types of people who travel to that hotel, right? Person for business or a person for, a group or someone for leisure or someone like, so each of them shop differently for that hotel and they're on different channels and they, so it's about how do you get in front of each of these people on all these different channels, effectively advertising your specific property compared to like the other hotels that are trying to get in front of them. So you have to understand not only your hotel market, but where people are shopping for your hotel and how they shop for your hotel. So it's definitely very cool. Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome. I can definitely nerd out on the numbers. That's something that
Yeah.
I definitely enjoy.
Yeah.
But I want to also share your career journey because as I mentioned in the beginning,
Definitely.
you've been at some amazing companies and you have had such a great history in this field. And so what are, I don't know, 2 to 3 poignant transitions that you've had in your career that led you to this place?
Yeah, good question. And, I think I started my hotel career in San Diego at a property that was this beautiful resort style hotel. It was
Okay,
on the
which
water on an
one?
island.
Which one?
Okay, so it's called the Sheraton San Diego Hotel and Marina. It's across the street from the airport. It's on Harbor Island, and it's just a beautiful property and still one of my favorite hotels that I've ever worked at. And being in San Diego, it's such a beautiful city, and it's very difficult to not like it there, right? So as I was there and I was in San Diego, I was like, this is amazing, and I was doing really well at the hotel, and I was great performance, and I was like, I wonder if I could do this in a different market that's a little more fast paced. It's a bit dynamic. It's maybe a little bit difficult, and so one of the biggest pivots that I had was I left San Diego to go to New York City. And so I went from, doing marketing and sales for one hotel, couple of hotels here and there to doing revenue and sales analysis for 56 hotels based out of New York City. And that was a huge jump for me, but it was something that I kind of wanted to prove to myself, like, I could do okay in one property and I could probably stay in San Diego for the rest of my life, but it's either now or never, and let's see if there's any opportunities out there. And I was given the chance to move to New York and try to see if I can do it, and it was an incredible experience. So that was definitely one I think transition for me that was amazing. And obviously we all go through that same imposter type syndrome where you're like, how can I possibly go from one hotel to 56 and still do really well? But hotel industry, everybody is on the same side and we're all trying to support each other to do well. So it was like everyone's very supportive and patient as I was learning the ropes and understanding the markets and stuff like that. So that was a huge transition for me. After living in New York for a number of years, I wanted to move back to California, obviously, understandably. I loved New York, but I missed my family and I wanted to get back home. So another transition was coming back to California, but I didn't want to go down the traditional route of just going back to hotels. I really wanted to see, is there any technology companies out there that also were in the hospitality space? Because I was interested in technology and a lot of what was happening in hotels was going online. And I really wanted to understand like that aspect of it. And so as I came back to California, I started looking around and I noticed that Expedia.com was a big player in the hospitality industry, but they're also a technology company. So I felt like that would be a great transition for me to understand like how would it be to be on that side of it. And so when I came to California, I worked for Expedia.com. I was in the Los Angeles market, a market manager, managing the relationships with the Los Angeles hotels for Expedia. And it was an incredible experience. Again, learning that side of the business was I think, a huge change for me in my career because it was less about really the hotels and the properties, more about how does the technology find people and then bring them to the hotels. And that was a huge, huge experience for me. So,
Hold
I think,
on.
sorry,
I want to, no, you're fine. I want to interject
go ahead.
here because I want to make sure that we highlight this part of your story because I hear this from clients and just from people that I talk to out in the world. You're in an industry and you get to a point where you're like, I love this industry, but what else is out there? And this is such a great example of you going through that process and finding something that is adjacent to what your industry, your current industry is. And I know I come out of higher ed and it's that same way. People are in higher ed, they do it for certain reasons. And then they get to a point where they're like, I don't want to do this work anymore. And they go into like ed tech, right? And
Right,
that becomes
right.
a really great transition. So I just want to make sure that the listeners are
Yeah,
hearing that, because if you're in an industry where you think, you know, I like the industry, but maybe you're in a
right,
traditional
right.
career path that's not quite jiving with you, or something's kind of off, you know, looking at other organizations or companies that are doing something related, but not
Absolutely.
traditionally that route,
Absolutely.
is there's such opportunity, and especially in the tech space right now. I mean,
Sure.
that is such a huge space
Absolutely.
that people are moving into. So awesome for you for figuring
Yeah.
that out and taking that, because that also diversifies your career history and your career journey,
Right, right,
and makes you insanely more marketable going to,
right,
obviously
right.
now you're working for Hilton. So that move
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
worked for you.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, great point. When I was in with Starwood Hotels, is who I was with when I was in New York City, and I wanted to make a transition. I love the hotel industry, and I knew I'd stay in it forever. But you're absolutely right, and I looked at a lot of different factors, which I think people who were or who are in my similar position did the same thing. Was, you know, I could have gone to a software company that provided the software for Hilton or for Starwood Hotels, right? I could have gone the route of consulting. I could have gone the route of, you know, being a vendor on the other side, or, you know, there's many different routes when you look at it. And I felt comfortable with all of it because I'd been with the company for 7 years at that point. So I felt good. Like, and there's a lot of different opportunities. I know a lot of these things. And that's kind of like what you said. It was, I wanted to be sort of hotels adjacent. And so what I really did was I thought about, like, what is the future of the hotel industry? Because I want to be part of that. I don't want to be, you know, in something that was going to be, you know, obsolete 10 years from now. So I try to think about, like, what would be the future of hotels? Where is it going down? And at that time, online travel agencies were becoming very, very prominent in driving revenue to hotels. So I figured that was probably a good route to go down. And, you know, I'd look through my network on LinkedIn to see, do I know anybody at you know, Expedia? And sure enough, I did. I knew somebody who had done the same thing I did, and I just spoke to them, and they're like, "Oh, it's an amazing company. It's exactly how you're describing it. I think you would love it here." So it's exactly what I did. And when I went over and interviewed, I was like, "This is exactly what it was." And you're absolutely right. The company wanted to hire hotel people because obviously it's a tech company that operates in the hotel space, but they're also technology companies. So for me, it was perfect for both of us. It was sort of a perfect marriage there because I got to get a little bit of technology and back by my hotel side, and they got to get, you know, somebody who was in the hotel industry to kind of understand the technology of the hotel space. So it worked out really well.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I have to point out a few other things that you really hit
Okay.
on that I want to make sure that people are hearing in your story. One is being on top of trends and looking ahead. What is the future of the industry that you're in? And right now with COVID, there's a lot of speculation within a lot of industries. So there's a lot of opinion out
Right.
there and all of
Right.
that. So again, for those of you who are looking maybe to make a transition, or what does the future look like, staying on top of those industry trends and understanding, like trying to have that forward thinking momentum, like that is huge in your career progression. But also utilizing LinkedIn, which I know you're probably
Yeah.
the third or fourth interview where we talk about LinkedIn and utilizing it, and utilizing your network of people, you know, and who do you
Yeah.
know? Make sure that you're continuously building that network on LinkedIn or off, whatever is most comfortable for you. But those people will be your advocates. And if you're in an
Right.
industry that you like, then really start genuinely connecting with people who are movers and shakers in that industry, because that's also where
Right.
you can get information of what is up and coming and what is happening and what are the opportunities that are available to you. So that's awesome.
Right.
So thank you so much for sharing that,
Awesome.
because I think that'll
Yeah.
be a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
great connection point for people.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think that technology is moving so fast, and people who, you know, we're in the middle of COVID, and there's been a lot of job loss, and especially in the hotel industry, but there's been so much opportunity in technology for people to make pivots. And, you know, it's not going to change anytime soon. If not, technology is just going to accelerate even faster. And there's nobody who is a domain expert in any of these technologies, right? People who learn them, they learn them by doing it. And so this is a tremendous opportunity, especially if you're thinking about transitioning out of a position or thinking about just starting something new. There's so much technology out there that people don't even know how to use. You can become an expert in a matter of months, and you can use that expertise to then work at a company or whatever industry you want. So I've always loved keeping up to date on the trends and what's happening in technology. And TikTok is a perfect example of nobody really is leveraging TikTok for advertising. And I just read an article this morning that a bunch of brands are starting to try it out, right? So there's an opportunity for your brand. If you became the domain expert for your company in TikTok and had to advertise digitally, that could be an opportunity for you down the road. But there's so much opportunity in general with technology and being able to leverage it that I think now is the best time more than ever to make a pivot, should you want to make a pivot, right?
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
totally.
All right. Any more transition points that you want to talk
Yeah,
about?
yeah. I mean, I definitely. I think after Expedia, I kind of went. I said, I went from hotels and then went to hotels adjacent to Expedia. What if I go full tech? So the next pivot I went was to go to Amazon.com. So full tech, and I think that was again one of the best moves I've ever made because Amazon is. I think it's a different planet altogether. The way they operate in building tech from the ground up and then integrating different verticals into that is just absolutely incredible. And they know their customers better than anybody else. And they built their platform on being customer obsessed. And I think for me, that pivot was amazing because it taught me two things. It taught me one thing that like you can build a company to be a $1 trillion company, but still make it feel like it's a startup, right? Which is amazing because had I not gone over to Amazon, I wouldn't have known that that was the way they've operated, but it was amazing. But it also made me think about how I also wanted to still be in the hospitality industry. So it kind of was like missing it, a lot in terms of like, I kind of wanted to, be tech adjacent, but also be in the hotel industry again. So I was extremely fortunate to work for Amazon because it's an incredible company to work for and really, especially in the tech industry, but it gave me that perspective. Like, I think I still want to be in the hotel industry somehow, but still be with technology. So how could I make, the pivot back, more or less? And then that's where Hilton came around, which is I'm at now. And now it allows me to use my digital marketing understanding of the market, my experience at Amazon and Expedia, but also be back in the hotel industry. And so I'm fortunate to have had those pivots because I think it led exactly to the position I have now, where if you were just in hotels, I think it'd be difficult to transition into because, that's why they hired somebody from that knows all these different channels, like all my travel agencies and technology, because it isn't something traditionally hotels do, and it's something that they've grown into. And so I'd had to have learned it from somewhere else, but not within the hotel. So I felt fortunate that I've had these pivots. So here I am now, right at Hilton, and it's awesome.
That's so great. Okay. I am now understanding more why you got this title of Hotel Management Magazine's emerging leader in the hospitality industry. It's all coming together through your story.
Okay.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those points because I think that helps people understand when you're switching industries, when you're switching functional areas, that thought process and what happens to us. Oh, I miss this, or I want to try something new. And I have a skill set that can transfer into this other area. And I think sometimes people get really stuck in, well, I have this really unique skill set and I can only do this one thing. And they don't think about how that can apply beyond what they're currently doing. And I think you've really demonstrated that you've been able to do that. So I think that's a really great encouragement to people out there who might have that limited mindset about their skill set.
Yeah, awesome. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's get into more of the resourcing side of the interview. So as I told you earlier, I like to resource people. I want to make sure that we're sharing whatever tips and tricks that we've used in our career journey with the audience to help them and again, just like open their mind to what is out there and what is possible. So what are a few pieces of advice that you would give to people who are trying to advance their career? And that could be specifically within the hotel hospitality industry or just in general. And then are there some things that maybe you would have done different in your career if you could go back?
Sure. So I'll start with the first one. I think that what I've learned again through social media, especially LinkedIn, is that there's so many people who are willing to help. In any case, you provide perspective or feedback or connection or just in general. So if you see somebody you admire and you think that, well, they're too above me, they might not want, me to reach out to them. I mean, I would disagree with that because they were in your position at one point, and I'm sure somebody helped them out. And so, finding somebody you can connect to, or even finding a mentor that would help you along the way is very important, because they can help you kind of navigate a lot of things that you might not be able to navigate on your own, and help you, kind of avoid some pitfalls that, that they maybe have fallen into. And then when you get in that position, you can do the same thing. So I'm starting to see a little bit of that right now, where people who are starting in the hotel industry are reaching out, asking me perspectives and questions, and I love it, and I'm more than happy to help. And sometimes I prioritize that over really doing anything else, because I'm like, I was there once, I remember that. It's a scary world, and you don't know what to do next. You just want somebody's perspective. So obviously leverage social media. You don't necessarily want to go in cold, but like it's a small world. There's a lot of connections. There's a lot of opportunities to connect. If you see somebody on a webinar and you hear them speaking, you really resonated with you, I would say feel free to reach out and just mention, I heard you in a webinar. These points were resonated with me. I'd love to speak to you more about them. And it goes a long way. People love that, and people like to talk about the things that they're passionate about. So I would definitely say leverage that. I also I love learning in general, and I know that the industry is moving so fast, the hotel industry, but also the digital marketing industry is moving so fast. And I always look for opportunities to learn more about something. So when I subscribe to a lot of publications for technology, hospitality, and I always keep an eye on for something that I think it might be emerging, and then I try to learn more about it. But more importantly, I think there's so much free online learning and resources that are available that people don't really know about. Facebook, for example, has a thing called Facebook Blueprint, which they give you free training on advertising on Facebook. And it literally, you can certify as a Facebook advertiser in a matter of months and be a domain expert in advertising on Facebook. Google has the same thing for free. Google has an ads academy with thousands of hours worth of free training and content that you can become an expert. So, and then there's boot camps, right? Like a 2-week boot camp on anything you can possibly think of that will make you, and this is people who are in the industry teaching these things. So I hear people who say, well, I can't restart my career now. And I'm like, you know what? There's so much opportunity and resources. You don't have to do it overnight. You can take it class by class, and you'd be surprised after a couple of years how much you know and how much you can pivot. So I always say, like, just start somewhere, find a boot camp, find a book, find a podcast, whatever it might be. You'd be surprised at how quickly you pick it up, because things change so fast that whatever you thought you didn't know before, now you know most of, because you're up to date on what's happening, right? So I always kind of give that feedback. But then the second question of what would I change now that I know? To be honest with you, it's hard. I try to change right away when something goes wrong, just because I think that's my personality. I like constant feedback. Obviously, it's probably a little bit of aspect of my generation, but I think I am where I'm supposed to be. I feel like everything that's happened to me in the past is specific, and it's kind of led me and had helped me grow. So I think I probably would have asked people for help more often, as opposed to now that I'm further in my career. I think that people would have been more willing to help me if I just asked, right? That's kind of why I give that advice. Asking people if I see a position that I want to be in, have been into, either a director role or whatever it might be, asking how did you get there, asking them questions of what can I do to get there, type of thing, as opposed to thinking that they'd come to me and kind of bring me up through the ranks. It's more about like, I need to take the initiative to ask the questions to see what I need to do to get there. So that's sort of the advice I'd give. But I just feel fortunate with the background I have that I'm exactly where I want to be, and I'm doing the things I want to do for a company that I love. So I have no complaints personally in that respect.
That's awesome. I love hearing that. I love hearing that, because I feel like a lot of times people, I don't know, they're like, I don't like my job. I hate this. I hate that. Like, we hear that so often, not necessarily like on LinkedIn or anything like that, but in our personal lives.
Yeah.
And so I love talking to people who genuinely are like, I love my job. I love what I'm doing, because that's possible to get there. And one of the key things I think you hit on is the learning aspect and the skill building aspect. And I recently, just in the last maybe 4 or 5 months, learned about Facebook Blueprint and all these other things as a business owner. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
There are people who are charging thousands of dollars to teach this, and Facebook is literally giving it away for free. And that's part of doing your research and seeing, what do you need if you want to transition. there's a class
Right.
out there. Somewhere there is a class
Yep.
out there. YouTube, all these different resources are available to you to learn if you're willing to put in the time to learn them. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's a huge
definitely.
mindset shift for some people around the
Yeah.
limitations that they think they have in their skill set. That's really just
Right.
them.
And I think one thing to add to that you kind of reminded me was, I would look at positions that I wanted to be in one day, like a director or VP, whatever it might be, or even a senior manager role. And I'd look at what the requirements were for technology. And I would say, oh, okay. So I'd go then research free courses on that specific technology. So that way I can add it to my resume. I'd take a certification course within a matter of weeks, and then I'd become certified in that technology. And you'd be surprised, a lot of these vendors give free training on their own software, and you can learn that software very quickly. And if it's a requirement, now you satisfy that requirement. Whereas before, you might not have had a ton of experience in it, but you go through those motions and you understand the learning of it. You take a test that certifies you. Now you're certified in the software, and it's not that difficult to do. You'd be surprised at how much resources are out there. HubSpot type things where they provide free HubSpot certifications, and like I said, Facebook and Google. I mean, you can transform your career in a year if you really wanted to, if you're really dedicated to. So there's so much resource. And yeah, YouTube is, I use YouTube probably daily to learn more about what I need to do. If I'm unclear about something specific, like even digital marketing, I'm like, I'm unclear on this specific, Google feature, like I'm just gonna go YouTube. And sure enough, there's 10 videos with people who are experts at it. And within a matter of minutes, I've now become an expert, right? Like, I think that has been the biggest help, I think, to humankind in general is YouTube and the education factor of it, because I use it almost on a daily basis.
Yes. Okay. I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that.
No,
that's awesome.
Not.
I love hearing that, because that's the other side of it too. I think sometimes people think, oh, you just magically know all of these things.
Yeah.
No, that's really not the case.
Yeah.
We research, we look things up. That's how you continue to learn, is you find the answers for yourself.
Right.
So that's
right.
awesome.
Definitely.
Okay. So what are 3 management tips that you have, either as somebody who manages others or who has been managed at some point in your career, that you think are helpful for people to know?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been very lucky to have incredible mentors and leaders in the companies I've worked for. And one thing that always sticks out to me is usually when you see two different leaders, they have 2 different styles. On one style, it's somebody who constantly gets upset or is disappointed with their team, and often looks for blame or fault, and really hones in on that. And fortunately, for me, the managers that I've always resonated with, that I also try to implement in my leadership or management style, is really like understanding, identifying that there's an issue, but then what to do, move forward, like identifying it, how to not have this happen next time, and then moving forward with the end result of what you want to accomplish, right? The goal isn't to hound somebody or criticize them or scold them. It's really like, this is the problem that happened. How do we fix it as a team? How do we all take responsibility for this and fix it as a team? And where I see a lot of managers falling in trap is trying to assign blame more so than trying to fix the exact problem, because in the short term, that makes sense. You want to discipline people, but in the long run, it doesn't really solve the objective of fixing the problem in general. So what I've seen from a lot of my leaders, that even when I've made mistakes, I'm ready to get the backlash. And usually that's not the case. It's like, okay, there's a problem that happened. Okay, what do we do next? Like, what's the next step? How do we solve this, and how do we move forward? Because they know the type of person you are. They know that it was a mistake, and you're going to move forward with it. And I'm always appreciative of that, because if you consistently do that and consistently be positive and instill that sort of mentality with your team, it trickles down to everybody. So they treat their employees that way, and vice versa. And so the entire team has the same objective in mind. It's to get to the end result, regardless of how you get there, regardless of what happened, before that. You're all trying to get to the end result, and which is providing, in my industry, providing a customer with the best possible guest experience, right? Mm-hmm. And how do you do that? You all work together towards that. It's not about pointing blame. It's about, okay, that happened, or I have a positive attitude about it. Yeah, that is the case, but let's figure out how to happen, and I've personally felt that I've had mentors where I would want to get upset on behalf of them, and they're not upset. It's like, why are you not upset about this? Like, clearly they did you wrong. And it's like, yeah, well, it is what it is. Let's move on. Let's move forward. And then I take from that, like, okay, I guess I get to move forward, and I can move on with it, and I can see the positive side of it. And sure enough, it turns out to be a much better way of doing it. And for me personally, I've grown so much by trying to adopt that mentality of like, yeah, it is what it is. Let's move on. Let's figure out what needs to happen. There's no need to assign blame. Let's just figure it out. What's the next step to kind of get there? And I would say that for me, that has been the biggest, I think, growth opportunity for me, where I've seen the most positive come from it. Because in that person that knows they messed up, they see that you've kind of afforded them that sort of grace, or that the ability to kind of, like you recognize there's an issue, you've moved forward with it. Then that relationship is so much stronger, because they know, like, if I was to mess up, I would be able to rebuild and keep going, moving forward with it, as opposed to having to explain myself and stepping backwards and retracing my steps and all the things that go along with it. So I'm very fortunate to have had mentors that have taught me that along the way.
That is such great advice, and not something that I've heard explained in that way, which I really like. And it's looking at how can your team learn? How can your people learn from whatever that mistake or issue is? And was it something that they did specifically because they just didn't know? Or is a system broken? Or is there a breakdown in the team somewhere? And I really appreciate that, instead of just, let's point the finger at at this person.
Yeah.
Let's look at what is the bigger issue, because what if it's a process issue? What if it's something that could have been mitigated 10 steps back and wasn't? Now that's something we need to change. And then there's an accountability part there. And I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that is so wise.
And I'd love to share a specific example, because I bet some people who are listening to this have had this happen in their company, where company headquarters rolls out a new policy or a new software, and the software you feel isn't up to the standards it needs to be. It doesn't work well. It doesn't answer the questions. It's difficult, or it's broken. And so our tendency is to complain about it and really give it to them in terms of like, this doesn't fit our needs. But what I found is that usually just resonates with the rest of the team. And then they start getting frustrated, and then they start getting mad about it. So even if you feel that way, like, yes, it's broken and you don't feel like it's the right way, or it could be fixed, or whatever it might be, your job is not to do that. Your job is to really get your team to understand how to use this moving forward and how to make it work, because you're not going to change it. It's not your job to change it. There are opportunities to provide feedback, but your job is to really, how do I implement this technology, make it work for my team as it is, because that's what needs to happen, because the end result is to make this work. And so I've seen leaders in my own, in my own experience, that have done that really well, where like I've said, like, this is terrible, but they're like, no, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to go about doing it. This is how we're going to fix it. This is how we're going to move forward. And honestly, it makes a huge difference. And you can compare even, offices to offices, or hotels to hotels, where one team is the negative Nancy's, or whatever you want to call them, and the other team is very positive and they're moving forward with it. And it makes a dramatic difference. And it starts with the leadership, but it starts with the people, the executive committee team, who says, you know what, this is what it is. This is how we're going to move forward with it. It might not be perfect, but it's what we have. Let's continue to kind of progress through that. And 10 out of 10 times, I've always appreciated that perspective. It's always turned out to be better than you think it's going to be, because you have that positive mentality. So 10 out of 10 times, and everybody's a lot happier with that. So that's another, I guess, direct example of, I'm sure everybody has experienced in their company, their industry, whatever it might be, their school.
Yeah. And I think it speaks to the fact that the leadership has so much more influence than sometimes they realize that they have about a specific issue. And even just coming out and making a simple statement, whatever it is, can help with everybody else who's under them to go,
exactly.
Oh, okay, this person is supporting this. That means it's a good thing. Let's have a better attitude about it. Yes, I have seen that in positions I've held go both ways. So I appreciate that. Yeah, that's such a great example, because I know we've all been in situations where we've had that technology piece come in, and it's been a nightmare.
You're like, oh, this is going to be bad. No, yeah, totally agree.
Yeah. Okay, so again, I love resourcing people. So one thing I like to do is have my guests share about a book that has influenced their life or career, or made you change your perspective about your life or career. So what is that book for you?
Yeah. My gosh, I was thinking about that a lot, because I read a lot. I love reading. I mean, hundreds of books I've read. It's just personally something I like to do. It's a hard question, and I know that I do want a direct answer. I'll tell you that at every stage of my career, I found a book that really talked to me personally about like, I'll pick up a book, I'll start reading. I'm like, well, this doesn't really feel right. I don't really understand it. I'm not really getting through it. I'll put it down. But every once in a while, I'll pick up a book. I'm like, yeah, this is exactly what I was looking for. So I think early on in my career, the book, Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, was a big book for me. It really talked to understanding how people operate, right? And when you start your career, it's like you really don't know these things because you don't have enough experience managing people or talking to people, negotiating, stuff like that. So that book really taught me the understanding of people, what influences people, how to react to one another, how to move forward, how to get things done. And it's obviously a world famous book, and most people like it. Most people talk about it, but it's something that I love, that was given to me by an early mentor, and I loved it. But I would say more recently, I like biographies of like, iconic founders, because kind of like what this podcast is all about, most iconic founders started out in humble beginnings and they pivoted where they didn't even know they were going to pivot. An example of a current company, Hilton, Conrad Hilton 100 years ago wanted to be a banker, and he went to buy a bank, and the banker tried to, stick it to him by upcharging him once he went there. And he's like, I'm out of here, forget it. And he ended up going across the street to the hotel. And he was like, this is a money cash making machine. Like, how come no one's taking advantage of this? And, 100 years later, it's one of the most recognizable brands in the world. But like, it's amazing to me that when you read these books, they've all started in similar humble beginnings. And it's just starts by taking small steps. And now, these companies are great. So I love reading about people, how they built their companies. And the most recent book I'm reading now it's called Platform Revolution. It's about how a lot of these new companies that are coming up are about platforms like the Ubers and the Amazons and Stitch Fix or Shopify, and how they're creating a new generation of real companies that don't really sell anything. They're just kind of providing the means for one a seller to meet a customer, and they provide the technology to bring them together. So reading about that, because I think that's the future of where our industry is going in general is platforms. So I really want to know, do I know more about it? Can I learn more about it, type of thing. So that's sort of how I go about reading and learning, I guess.
Awesome. Awesome. And for the audience, I will link all those recommendations in the blog
Really?
post. And you might have to send me a couple more. If you're an avid reader, send
Sure.
me a list of
Avid reader,
your
yeah.
top 5 books of all time.
Sure.
And I'll
take my
include
top
that.
10 books. How about that?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes. There we go. And we'll include it in the blog post for the listeners. That would be awesome.
Awesome.
Okay.
Definitely.
So part of what I do in my work, I'm a career strategist, and I'm all about taking control of your career. And I think you have definitely articulated and shared with us times that you have been able to do that. So I want to leave us with this last question. Tell me about a time that you felt you really took control of your career.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to my first job. Like I said, when I went from San Diego to New York, I think that I knew I wanted to go to New York City at some point in my life. I think I wasn't ready. I think that I was unqualified, but I felt like, this is either I could stay here and do this. I loved my hotel. I loved being in San Diego. The people there are very close to me. I'm still friends with most of them. Some of them went to my wedding, whatever it might be, but I loved it there, and it was comfortable and it was easy, and it's a beautiful city. Life was easy there, right? But I really knew, like, if I really wanted to see if I can grow myself, I'm going to have to take a step that's scary, that I don't think that I feel qualified to do. And moving to New York City, I'd never been there before, moving there and getting a job there and trying to grow my career there was scary enough. And I think, that kind of set the tone for me personally. It might seem hard, it might be scary, it might be tough, but it's definitely going to grow you. And, you could always come back to standing if you really wanted to, right? Because it's comfortable and it, but unless you kind of put yourself out there and see what might be scary, might be terrible, it's not permanent and can always be resolved. And I think, to me, that's been sort of my transition in general. Was I'll check it out, I'll see how it goes, I'll do my due diligence and researching, but in the worst case scenario, I could always just go back to what I had. But I've never done that so far. I always kind of moved forward. So I've loved almost every company I've worked for, I loved, and I've people that I'm still friends with at every company, every job I've had. So I'm fortunate that I've kind of walked down that my path so far. So
that's awesome. Jason, thank you so much for being a guest. This has been such a wonderful conversation. Oh my gosh. I know that our listeners are going to get a lot out of this. I love all the conversation around the future and looking at that and what does that mean for your career, I think that's such a key component that people can take away from this discussion. So thank you so much. And where can people connect with you if they want to reach out, learn more, and be mentored by you, probably?
Anytime, anybody who wants to learn more or whatever it might be, I don't know if I've hopefully provided value, but LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. Just search Jason Abdullah. I come up. I've claimed that link on LinkedIn early on. So you'll find me under Hilton, and happy to connect. I typically connect with anybody who wants to, and that's probably the best place to find me.
Okay, great. And again, we will link that into the blog post so you can find all that information and all of the resources that we've talked about today. And again, thank you so much, Jason.
Yeah, thanks for having me.